In the remote village of Obnago, cradled by rolling hills and the quiet songs of the forest, traditions held more weight than the wind that swept through its narrow paths. Obnago wasn't marked on most maps, but it had a rhythm, an ancient pulse that governed every birth, union, and departure. The people lived by the laws of their ancestors, and to deviate from them was to stir the wrath of both the living and the dead. Ndubisi was the pride of his family, the first son of the revered elder Mazi Okolie. He was tall, fair-skinned, with a gaze as steady as the hills that washed over the village. At 27, he had built a name for himself as a palm wine tapper known far and wide for producing the sweetest brew. His shoulders carried responsibility like a second skin, and his heart was as patient as the moon. The time had come for him to take a wife after long consultations and quiet inquiries. The elders of his household agreed upon a maiden named Amaka from the neighboring village of Umakoro. Amaka was stunning, so beautiful that even the birds paused mid-flight when she walked by. Her skin glistened like shea butter in the morning sun, and her eyes held a mischief that made even the sternest men curious. More than her beauty, she came from a respected lineage, and her character was praised in hushed, reverent tones. The families met, kola nuts were broken, palm wine flowed freely, and the bride price negotiations were swift and smooth. The gods, it seemed, smiled upon their union. Amaka was introduced formally to the Okolie family, and the villagers began to hum songs of an impending wedding. A week later, Ndubisi decided to take his younger brother Obinna along to visit Amaka and deliver a small gift, a gold-plated necklace and a hand-woven wrapper. Obinna was 2 years younger, slightly tall and effortlessly charming. While Ndubisi was known for his quiet strength, Obinna was the fire that refused to be hidden under ashes. Married already to a beautiful wife named Adora, Obinna still carried a restlessness in his spirit. He loved fiercely, lived loudly, and walked with the reckless confidence of a man who had never known rejection. They arrived at Amaka's compound just before dusk. The crickets had begun their evening chants, and a faint scent of roasted plantain hung in the air. Amaka stepped out to greet them, her waist beads dancing beneath her wrapper. Her eyes scanned the two men and settled, lingered on Obiora. In that moment, something shifted. It wasn't loud or obvious, but it was there. A silent exchange, a ripple in the fabric of fate. Amaka's lips curled into a smile that stretched just a little too wide. Her voice, when she greeted them, trembled firmly. "Welcome, my future husband," she said to Ndubisi, but her eyes never left Obinna. Ndubisi, ever composed, nodded with gratitude. Obinna offered a teasing bow. "I see my brother's taste is exceptional," he said with a grin. "You are as beautiful as they described." "Only as beautiful as the man who noticed," Amaka replied softly, almost imperceptibly. The night passed with laughter and conversation, but Amaka's heart had been kidnapped in broad daylight, and not by the man she was meant to marry. That night, under the weight of stars and silence, Amaka made a decision that would unravel the destinies of everyone involved. She packed her belongings silently, swiftly. Her mother, asleep in the next hut, heard nothing. Her father, long gone from this world, couldn't rise to stop her. She walked through the moonlit paths like a spirit on a mission, her feet finding their way to Obinna's compound. The villagers woke the next morning to chaos. A maiden had entered a man's house without prior rights, and not just any man, Obinna, a married man. In Obunagu, such an act was not seen as a mistake. It was destiny, irrevocable by tradition. Any maiden who entered a man's house and stayed the night was considered married to him by the gods themselves. No ceremony could undo it. No human tongue could refute it. Obinna was stunned. Amaka sat in his hut like a queen, defiant and unbothered. Adora, his wife, was grief-stricken but not shocked. She had seen the look Amaka gave her husband that evening. She had felt the chill of something dark brewing, but she had prayed it was only her imagination. The elders were summoned. Mazi Okoli arrived with thunder on his face, followed by Mazi Uzodimma, Amaka's uncle, who looked like the ground beneath him was cracking. Young woman, one of the elders barked, "Do you know what you have done?" "I followed my heart," she answered, bold as brass, "and your Lord supports me." Ndubisi stood a feet away, stone-faced. He didn't say a word. His heart was not broken. It was shattered beyond repair. The council had no choice. The law was clear. Obinna now had 2 wives. The villagers whispered. Some said Amaka had been possessed by a wandering spirit. Others claimed she was bewitched by Obinna's charm. A few murmured that perhaps the god had chosen differently for the men. But most knew Amaka had simply fallen for the wrong brother. The days turned into weeks, and life in Obinna's compound turned bitter. Adora's once vibrant laughter faded into sighs. Amaka, who had come with fire, soon found that the spark she chased flickered more than it burned. Obinna, thrilled by her presence at first, began to feel the weight of divided love. He tried to balance both women, but love does not split evenly. It clings, it gravitates. Ndubisi became a shadow. He went back to his work, tapping palm wine in silence, never once speaking of Amaka again. But the village watched him. They saw the pain behind his smile, the ache in his gaze. Then came the dreams. Adora began to wake up screaming in the middle of the night. She saw a woman in white with flaming eyes and a bleeding mouth. She says, "We've broken the ancient bond," Adora cried. She says a debt is owed. The elders called for a diviner. The gods had been insulted. A woman had been promised to one and forcefully taken by another. Though the tradition allowed it, the spiritual realm had not been consulted. An appeasement had to be made, or the land would bleed misfortune. A goat was slaughtered, libations were poured, but the dreams persisted. Then came the drought. For the first time in decades, Obunagu's streams began to dry. Crops withered under a punishing sun. Children fell ill. The villagers assembled at the shrine of Allah, the earth goddess. The priestess emerged, her face smeared with chalk and camwood. "The balance has been broken," she intoned. "The bride was not meant for the brother she chose. The gods demand justice, or this land shall know only suffering." "But what is justice when the deed is done?" asked Mazi Okoli. The priestess turned to Ndubisi. "You must choose," she said. "Call her back and forgive, or banish her from your thoughts and bless their union with your heart." Ndubisi closed his eyes. He remembered Amaka's smile, the scent of her hair, the joy she once brought. But that woman was no longer his. She had never truly been. "I release her," she said. "Let her be his. May the gods accept my surrender." The priestess nodded. "Then so shall it be." Rain fell that night for the first time in 4 months, but peace did not come to Obinna's house. Immediately the thunderstorm washed the village, but not the weight on their hearts. Amaka stayed. She no longer walked like a queen. The defiance in her step had softened. She now moved like one carrying an invisible burden, quietly learning the rhythms of her house that never fully welcomed her. But she stayed. She watched how Obinna would glance at Adora during meals, the way he touched her gently in passing. Now, how his face lit up when their children played around him. She saw the difference, she felt the difference, yet she didn't leave. At night, when Obinna turned to her, it was with a measured affection, dutiful, kind, but never desperate. Not like how he held Adora in the dark, whispering secrets only they understood, but Amaka stayed. Some evenings she would sit outside, her back against the mud wall, watching the stars fade into morning. The wind would stroke her face like an old friend, and in those moments she found clarity. She had made a choice. Perhaps it wasn't the wisest. Perhaps it wasn't even love. Maybe it was an illusion, spun by desire and rebellion, that it was hers. Over time, the house settled like a calmed river. Adora, broken but gracious, began to share space with Amaka without bitterness. She never forgot, but she forgave, partly for peace, partly for her children. Amaka never tried to compete. She helped Adora raise the children, fetched firewood when no one asked, and stayed quiet when the village women gossiped near the stream. Her pride faded, and from its ashes grew something gentler, humility. She learned to live in the shadows of someone else's love and still find a place for her own heart. Years passed. Obinna aged, his energy dimming. With time, he came to respect Amaka in ways he hadn't before. Not with passion, but with admiration. For her loyalty, her endurance, her ability to stay when everything has pushed her to go. He would sometimes sit beside her now and say, "You stayed, Amaka, even when I gave you nothing but a roof." And she would smile. That roof kept the rain from my bones. That was something. The villagers stopped whispering. Children grew, seasons changed, and the household of Obinna became known not for its scandal, but for its balance. Unconventional, yes, but balanced. Ndubisi, far removed from it all, still visited occasionally, bringing palm wine and sitting in silence with Obinna. Not a word about the past passed between them. The wound was healed, leaving only a thin scar, a reminder, not a regret. Amaka lived, not as the woman who was chosen, but as the woman who chose and stayed. And in Obunago, where the trees remember, and the winds tell stories, the tale of the maiden who followed her heart and bore its thorns with grace was told, not as a warning, but as a lesson in strength, in consequence, and in a different kind of love.
Thank you for watching African Tales by Mumstique. If this story touched your heart, like, subscribe, and share. More real African stories await you here.